Right now, we have this problem where so much of our basic resources are imported from the outside. And so I'm most fundamentally interested in improving the self-sufficiency of communities so that in a situation where, say, the global supply chain has completely broken down and ground to a halt for whatever reasons, and there's a number of reasons that are not unrealistic that could happen, that local communities will still be able to survive without turning to cannibalism. Because I don't like cannibalism, I think that would be bad. So I'm most interested in seeing these communities be able to produce enough to sustain themselves locally and internally, and then to start to have markets and new mechanisms for local currencies to find relationships with each other and to ultimately build out some larger structure that perhaps ends at the top with the currency of a nation state that is then globally active and can participate in the global supply chain. That's kind of what I'm looking for. And so I think blockchains are kind of providing a new platform and a new landscape in which we can start to experiment on different models of governance, different models of participation, different models of economics that can really start to inform how we can better design and enable communities to design their own organizations and to become more sustainable and wealthy from a position of actual wealth, not just financial wealth. So we're working on the Cosmos network, and one of the defining features of Cosmos is the idea of interoperability, right? And right now we have a lot of independent kind of self-sovereign blockchains that don't really connect or communicate with one another. And it's a problem for a number of reasons. One reason is that if you have, say, Bitcoins and you're doing stuff on Bitcoin and then you want to move over to Ethereum to do things that you can only do on Ethereum, the only way really to currently do that is to traverse through a centralized exchange. You send your Bitcoins to the exchange, you sell them for Ether, then you move your Ether to the Ethereum blockchain, and then you can do your stuff there. But as we all know, exchanges are central points of failure. They've had numerous high-profile attacks in the past where they've lost a lot of money, and the process, it's a little bit disconcerting that you have to do this and you have to actually go through this exchange. There might actually be tax consequences when all you're trying to do is access new functionality. You had to engage in a taxable event, right? And so what we're proposing is that we enable tokens to flow a little bit more naturally from one blockchain to another. Say Cosmos versus sharding, sharding kind of tries to encompass all the different blockchains under a common heading and under a common mechanism for deciding how they're going to run and when they're going to sync up. Whereas what we do in Cosmos is a little bit more flexible than that, a little bit more generic, where the blockchains that are running concurrently are a little more independent of each other and a little bit more sovereign and aren't quite as dependent on a single mechanism to kind of unite them. And that way they can operate more flexibly and more independently, and only when they actually need to interact will they engage in the interoperability mechanism that we've been working on, the inter-blockchain communication, or IBC as we call it, that will allow them to then understand each other, understand that some transaction happened in Shanghai that does need to be known about in Toronto. From that perspective then, the interoperability mechanism and standard that we're working on can actually provide an avenue to significant scalability benefits. With EDCON, I'm stoked about the fact that everyone came to Toronto because I grew up in Toronto, and this is a cool place to be. The development of the community in Toronto is phenomenal. Toronto has a raging blockchain and cryptocurrency community, and just a raging tech community in general. I've probably been to more talks at EDCON than I typically go to at a conference. Maybe all conferences combined. I like what the Ethereum research teams are doing. I think they're making interesting progress on sharding and plasma and so on. And I'm looking forward to a diversity of solutions to scalability. But so far no one has changed my extremely strong but maybe weakly held opinions.